There is a machine in almost every major hospital on Earth that if you walked up to it wrong could kill you in under a second. It is not behind thick concrete walls, it is not locked in a vault, and most of the time nobody standing near it has any idea what it is capable of doing. I am not talking about the radioactive materials, I am not talking about the X-ray machines or the linear accelerators. I am talking about something that appears to almost everyone who sees it completely harmless, something you might have been inside yourself, something your grandmother might have been inside. And yet, in terms of the raw physics of what can go wrong, it deserves a kind of respect we almost never give it. So let me ask you something fundamental. What makes a thing dangerous? See, when people hear the word dangerous in a hospital context, they immediately think of radiation. They picture those yellow warning signs with the three-bladed trefoil symbol. They imagine cobalt or cesium locked behind lead doors, humming with invisible death rays. And yes, those things demand respect. A cobalt-60 source used in radiation therapy, the kind they point at tumors to kill cancer cells, contains enough radioactivity to deliver a lethal dose in minutes, if you stood next to it unshielded. We are talking about gamma rays punching through your body, ripping electrons off your DNA, scrambling the instructions that keep your cells alive. But here is what most people do not realize. Those sources are not the thing hospital safety officers lose sleep over. Why not? Because everyone knows they are dangerous. The moment you see that yellow sign, your brain says, "Do not go in there. The source is locked in a massive housing. There are interlocks that prevent the door from opening when the beam is on. There are protocols written in triplicate. There are inspectors who show up unannounced. There are multiple layers of engineered protection because everyone from the janitor to the chief medical officer understands exactly what they are dealing with. The system works because the danger is obvious. But what about the dangers that give you no warning at all? Let me tell you about a different kind of machine. This machine weighs somewhere between 10 and 20,000 pounds. It contains materials cooled to temperatures colder than anywhere in the natural universe outside a physics laboratory. It holds enough stored energy to throw a grown man across a room like a rag doll. And yet in most hospitals there is nothing but a small sign on the door and maybe a verbal reminder from a bored technician before you walk right up to it. I am talking about the magnetic resonance imaging machine, the MRI. Now already I can hear some of you saying, hold on, MRI machines are safe. They do not use ionizing radiation at all. That is the whole selling point. Doctors use them precisely because they are gentler than X-rays or CT scans. You lie down on a table, you slide into a big plastic donut. You hear some loud banging and whirring for 20 minutes, and at the end you have detailed pictures of your insides without a single radioactive particle or X-ray photon involved. All of that is true, absolutely true. And yet, let me tell you what is actually happening inside that machine. Because once you understand the physics, once you really understand it, you will never look at one of these things the same way again. At the core of every MRI machine is a magnet. But calling it a magnet is like calling a thunderstorm a light drizzle. This is not a refrigerator magnet. This is not even the powerful industrial magnets you see on cranes, lifting cars at junkyards. This is a superconducting electromagnet producing a magnetic field between 1.5 and 3 Tesla. Now that number might not mean anything to you yet, so let me give you some perspective. The Earth has a magnetic field. It is what makes your compass needle point north. The strength of that field at the surface is about 50 millionths of a Tesla, 50 microtesla. That is enough to deflect a magnetized needle, but you cannot feel it. It exerts no perceptible force on the metal in your pocket. An MRI operates at 1.5 to 3 Tesla. That is 30,000 to 60,000 times stronger than the planetary field you are swimming in right now. Some research machines go even higher, 7 Tesla, 9 Tesla, pushing into territory where just thinking about the forces involved should make you uncomfortable. And here is the critical thing, the thing that changes everything about how you should think about these machines. That field is always on. There is no switch. When the hospital installed that MRI machine, technicians spent days or weeks carefully ramping up the current in the magnet coils. They raised it slowly, gradually, until the field reached its operating strength. And then they stopped. But the current did not stop. Because the coils are made of superconducting wire, an alloy of niobium and titanium cooled by liquid helium to around 4 Kelvin, that is 4 degrees above absolute zero. The current keeps flowing, forever. No resistance means no energy loss. The electrons just circle around and around, year after year, creating a permanent magnetic field that pervades the room. It is not like a flashlight that you turn on and off. It is more like a loaded spring that never uncoils. The field sits there, invisible, waiting. And it will keep waiting, perfectly patient, for as long as the helium keeps it cold. Waiting for what? Well, this is where the physics gets interesting, and where it gets very, very dangerous. You remember from basic physics that a magnetic field exerts a force on magnetic materials. Iron, nickel, cobalt, certain alloys. If you bring a paperclip near a bar magnet, it jumps toward it. Simple enough. But what you might not appreciate is how that force behaves near a field this strong, and more importantly, how it behaves near a field with this kind of gradient. The gradient is the rate at which the field strength changes as you move through space, and that gradient is what actually determines the force. An object sitting in a perfectly uniform magnetic field, even a very strong one, feels no net pull. It is the change in field strength, the spatial derivative, that yanks things around. Near an MRI, the gradient is ferocious. The field drops off sharply as you move away from the bore, and that drop-off is exactly what creates the pull. Let me paint you a picture. Suppose someone walks toward an MRI machine carrying something made of iron or steel, a pair of scissors, a wrench, a small oxygen tank strapped to a wheelchair. From across the room, they feel nothing. The field at that distance is too weak to notice. The gradient is gentle, but as they step closer, the force begins to build. First, it is a gentle tug, almost nothing, then a stronger pull. They tighten their grip. Then in the space of 1 or 2 more steps, something terrifying happens. The object rips out of their hand. It does not fall. It flies straight toward the center of the magnet. And whatever is in the way, a patient lying in the bore, a technician adjusting something, that thing is about to be hit by a metal projectile traveling at 20, 30, sometimes 40 miles per hour. This is not theoretical. This has happened. It keeps happening. Oxygen tanks have slammed into patients at lethal velocities. Floor polishers have rocketed across rooms. Wheelchairs have been pinned to magnets with such force that it took hours to remove them safely. There was a tragic case, where a child was killed when a ferrous oxygen cylinder became a missile inside an MRI room. And once something ferromagnetic is stuck to the magnet, you cannot just pull it off. The force holding it there can be hundreds or thousands of pounds. The only way to remove it safely in many cases is to quench the magnet. Which brings me to the real bomb. Because flying metal, as dramatic as it is, might be dismissed as a failure of protocol. Someone brought something into the room they should not have brought. Human error. Train the staff better. Put up more signs. Problem solved, right? The quench is different. The quench is not about what humans do wrong. The quench is about what the machine can do all by itself. Remember those superconducting coils? They are bathed in liquid helium, hundreds of liters of it, held at 4 Kelvin inside a heavily insulated vessel called a cryostat. The superconducting state depends absolutely on those temperatures. Niobium titanium wire conducts electricity with zero resistance only when it is cold enough. Below a certain critical temperature, the electrons pair up in a quantum mechanical dance that lets them flow without losing energy. Above that temperature, even by a few degrees, the magic stops. The wire becomes ordinary metal, and ordinary metal has resistance. If something causes a small region of the wire to heat up, if there is a tiny manufacturing defect or a mechanical shock or an external electromagnetic pulse, or even just accumulated microscopic damage from years of operation, that region can cross the critical threshold. And the moment it does, the current that was flowing effortlessly through zero resistance is suddenly flowing through normal resistance. What happens next is one of the most violent energy releases you will ever see outside of an explosion. But the resistive region generates heat. That heat conducts to the neighboring wire. The neighboring wire crosses its critical temperature. More resistance, more heat. The cascade propagates at something like 10 to 50 meters per second through the magnet windings. Within seconds, the entire coil, which was happily sustaining millions of amperes worth of circulating current, dumps all of its stored magnetic energy into heat. How much energy are we talking about? A typical 1.5 Tesla clinical MRI stores somewhere between 5 and 15 megajoules in its magnetic field. You can calculate it from the inductance in the current. It comes out to roughly the energy content of 2 to 4 kilograms of TNT. And it all comes out in a matter of seconds. But the energy itself is not even the main danger. What makes a quench truly terrifying is what happens to the helium. Liquid helium boils at 4.2 Kelvin. That is its boiling point at atmospheric pressure. When the magnet quenches, all that dumped energy has to go somewhere, and it goes into the helium bath. The liquid helium does not just warm up, it explosively vaporizes. And here is the key number you need to remember. 1 liter of liquid helium becomes approximately 700 liters of gas at room temperature. If you have 400 liters of liquid helium in the cryostat, which is typical for a clinical MRI, that becomes 280,000 liters of gas, in a room that might contain only 30 or 40,000 liters of air. Do you see the problem? The helium displaces the oxygen. It is lighter than air, so it rises first, filling the room from the ceiling down. But it mixes, it diffuses. Within moments, the oxygen concentration in the room drops from 21% to something much lower. The gas is invisible, it is odorless, it is not toxic in any chemical sense. You can breathe pure helium and it does nothing to your lungs. But you cannot survive without oxygen. At 10% oxygen, you become confused. At 6%, you lose consciousness almost instantly. At 0%, you are dead in 4 minutes. This is called asphyxiation. And unlike the flying metal, you cannot see it coming. You feel fine, you feel completely normal, and then without any warning, you feel nothing at all because you are unconscious on the floor while your brain starves for oxygen. Modern MRI installations have quench pipes designed to channel the helium gas outside the building, emergency vents that open automatically, oxygen monitors that sound alarms. But all of these systems have to work. The pipes have to be properly installed. The vents have to not be blocked. The building design has to accommodate the gas flow. And in the chaos of an unplanned quench, with alarms blaring and staff panicking, there is no guarantee that anyone will get out in time. Now, do you understand why I call this a bomb? It is not a bomb in the sense of flying shrapnel and fireballs, but in terms of stored energy, in terms of the speed of release, in terms of the invisible lethal threat. An MRI machine is in some ways more insidious than the radioactive sources stored behind lead walls elsewhere in the same hospital. The radioactive sources announce themselves. Everyone fears them. Everyone respects them. The MRI looks like a big friendly donut that plays soothing music while you lie inside looking at nature photographs. We treat it like furniture, and yet the physics does not care what we think. The physics says that there is a field strong enough to rip steel from your hands, enough stored energy to fill a room with unbreathable gas, and exactly 0 warning signs that any human sense organ can detect. So why do we use these machines? Why is every hospital buying more of them? Because they are extraordinary. The diagnostic images you can produce with magnetic resonance, the soft tissue detail, the ability to see inside a living brain without making a single incision, it is miraculous. And the trade-off, the real trade-off when you look at the statistics, is worth it. More people are saved by MRI diagnoses than are hurt by MRI accidents, by an enormous margin. Everything in physics involves trade-offs. Airplanes can fall from the sky, but we still fly because the benefits outweigh the risks when those risks are properly managed. The lesson here is not that MRI machines are bad. The lesson is much deeper than that. The lesson is about what dangerous really means. We have instincts that evolved over millions of years to detect certain kinds of threats. The snarl of a predator, the heat of a fire, the sight of a cliff edge. But there are phenomena in physics that give you absolutely no sensory warning. Radiation you cannot feel until the damage is done. Magnetic fields you cannot see or sense until something metal jumps out of your hand. Gases you cannot smell or taste until you are already unconscious. Nature does not owe us a warning. Nature just follows its laws. The electromagnetic force does not care whether you see it coming. And if we want to survive in a universe full of invisible forces, we have to understand the equations. We have to know what is really going on, especially when nothing seems to be happening at all. The next time you walk past an MRI room, or the next time you lie down inside one of those machines, take just a moment. Think about what is sitting there. A magnetic field tens of thousands of times stronger than the planet you stand on. Energy equivalent to several kilograms of explosive. A bath of liquid so cold that if a drop touched your skin it would cause instant damage. All of it hidden behind an unremarkable door with a small sign that says no metal objects. That is the whole warning. That is all you get. If that does not give you what I call productive fear, a healthy respect for forces you cannot see, then you have not truly understood the physics. But if you have understood it, then you are now part of a rather small group of people who walk through hospitals knowing where the real dangers actually sit. So here's my question for you, and I truly want to know the answer. Before today, before we had this conversation, did you have any idea what was hiding inside those MRI machines? Did anyone ever explain the physics to you? Or did you walk past them 100 times without a single thought? I am genuinely curious whether this was news to you, or whether I have been underestimating what people already know about the quiet bombs sitting in every hospital on Earth.